Hello, I'm Lauren Robel, Executive Vice President of Indiana University and Provost of our Bloomington campus. Congratulations to the Institute for International Business on its 10th anniversary. Indiana University is committed to global partnerships, and we believe in the power of global engagement to further public diplomacy. Therefore, I'm delighted to join you for this kickoff of the Kelley Worldwide Roundtable, a series that will serve as a model for productive global dialogue on some of the most pressing issues facing us today. This year's topic reaffirms the importance of global connectedness during periods of disruption and reflects the critical and ongoing need for thoughtful and cooperative cross-cultural exchange. In our highly connected world, businesses, systems, products, processes, and ideas know no borders. In a global crisis, our border-spanning partnerships are key to stability and continued progress. The pandemic we face is a testament to how interconnected we all are. We don't have to look much further than our own campus to witness how networks of support, communication, and encouragement stabilize both individuals and larger groups. In times of disruption, when plans and projects and lives are taken off course, these networks provide a framework on which to lean and ideas on which to draw. The pressures we face due to the pandemic are so extraordinary that we have to place a sharp focus on solving them together. I commend the Institute for International Business for leading the Kelley Worldwide Roundtable. At IU Bloomington, we remain committed to graduating students who are citizens of the world and who know the importance of connecting with one another through important conversations precisely like this one. Students from every inhabited continent travel to our campus to study, while thousands of our own students study abroad in a vast range of programs and across disciplines. We teach some 80 languages, more than any other university in the United States, and we organize regular events and showcases for our students the arts, ideas, and foods and traditions of cultures across the world. In immersing our students in diverse intellectual and cultural life, our goal is to graduate students who continue to learn across cultures and who celebrate difference and are informed by it. The Kelley School of Business shines bright in international education and actively reimagines how global business operates at its most optimal level. The Institute for International Business has connected Kelley's phenomenal creativity, energy, and people with the larger world. In true Kelley fashion, through the Kelley Worldwide Roundtable, it is forging a better pathway for us now. I want to congratulate the Institute on behalf of our entire campus on their 10th anniversary. Thank you.
It's a great pleasure to join you today, virtually, to welcome you to this roundtable event. Its goal is to explore the importance of global connectedness during this period of such intense disruption of our society and our economy. The pandemic has reinforced something we already know, which is that addressing the most challenging issues of our time requires collaboration across countries and cultures, and requires the kind of innovation and creativity that are often sparked by bringing together multiple sources of expertise and multiple perspectives. For businesses worldwide, as for universities worldwide, it is critical at this moment to expand the channels of communication and engagement that promote the open exchange of ideas across borders. In that connection, I'm delighted that IU's Global Gateway offices have been able to play a role in supporting this event. The Gateway Network was designed to give IU a permanent presence in other regions of the world, bringing us closer to our academic partners, industry partners, and alumni to facilitate exactly this kind of durable cross-border engagement. The network was established just 6 years ago and now has offices in Bangkok, Beijing, Berlin, Mexico City, and New Delhi. And I'd like to thank the office directors who worked on this event. Today is also, of course, a celebration of global connectedness on the occasion of the Institute for International Business's 10th anniversary. In the same way that the Global Gateway offices connect IU with the world, the IIB connects the Kelley School of Business with the world. Through work to solve development challenges in emerging markets, always working in collaboration with local partners. Through training programs in entrepreneurship and skills that build the capacity of individuals, businesses, and communities in developing countries. And through its educational programs here in the United States that provide international and intercultural learning opportunities to students in high school and beyond. The Institute's work models the kind of mutual engagement that will help us confront and address change at the scale that we're experiencing today. So, congratulations to the Institute for International Business, to Dean Id Kessner, to Executive Director LaVon Schlegel and her team on this 10th anniversary. And thanks to all of you for coming together today to think about where we are and how we move forward together.
Hello from Bloomington. I'm Id Kessner, Dean of the Kelley School of Business. Thank you for participating in this important roundtable discussion and for helping us celebrate 10 years of the Institute for International Business, or as we refer to it, IIB. The IIB has a special significance to me, not just because I'm the Dean of Kelley, but I helped create the Institute 10 years ago. Our goal was to transform lives, organizations, and communities by nurturing partnerships and dreams, by building entrepreneurial knowledge in communities, and by creating momentum in emerging and developing markets. It's been wonderful to watch the IIB establish, foster, and grow new relationships and enterprises, particularly among women and young people, and in the areas where hope and progress are needed most. Through the years, we've watched Kelley's footprint expand around the globe. As examples, in Myanmar, our ADEPT program created training centers and strengthened faculty and curricula at Yangon University of Economics. In Bethlehem, we helped launch 13 startup companies and train more than 1,600 people in our business incubator. In Barbados, a partnership with the Cave Hill School of Business helped provide critical training to combat growing social and economic issues. I may be most proud of our Global Business Institute, or GBI. Through GBI, the partnership with Coca-Cola Company, we inspired nearly 600 young people in the Middle East and North Africa. These students hungered to know more about business and entrepreneurship, and they showed a willingness to push themselves and others towards something better. You can actually see the transformation in these students during their time in Bloomington and other locations in the U.S. They realized their dreams and ideas could be developed into viable businesses and projects that could lead to real change in their communities back home. The results? More than 160 small businesses were created that employed nearly 800 people. More than 160 participants in the program went on to earn scholarships for further study. And 95% of the students were employed within 3 months of graduating from college. Those are the statistics, but the real impact is immeasurable. IIB is also home to the Center for International Business Education and Research, or CYBER, which helps businesses in the U.S. compete successfully in the global marketplace. We're one of 15 national centers that are funded by the U.S. Department of Education. We manage funds for faculty development, internships, improving language skills, mentoring, and experiential learning. Over these 10 years, we've made many connections. But the word connections doesn't convey the fact that what we've really done is establish friendships. We built bridges between countries, fostered understanding, and created trusting, long-lasting relationships. We built empathy. One young participant in GBI said, "You don't just learn about business, you learn about people." While I had a hand in creating the IIB, there's no disputing that LaVon Schlegel is the heart and soul of the Institute. I can't imagine anyone else working as tirelessly and with as much determination and purpose as she has over the last 10 years. Her commitment to bring people together and transform lives, that continues to be realized. Even so, the pandemic means we must become more nimble and innovative in our efforts. Of course, LaVon has had a lot of enthusiastic help over the years. In the early days of IIB, Sean Connor and Fred Perry played key roles. And while they moved on to other important things at the university and in the world, we're grateful for those early efforts. And then we have our current staff, some of whom have been here since the beginning. Christine Everett, Suzanne Lodato, Jeff Poland, Tim Smith, Trina Chandler, Ryan Craven, and Amanda Wood. To all of you, please accept my sincere gratitude. Your dedication is inspiring, and I like to think we've helped create a more connected world with your bigger and bolder ideas. To all of you joining in, thank you for being with us for this event. We're honored you've chosen to spend time with us. I'm very proud of IIB's diligent work and accomplishments. But there's still more work to be done. So this is a working celebration. I urge you to keep the conversation going long after the discussion and celebration ends. Get involved. Help us write more chapters for this ongoing global story. Help us continue to create momentum around the world and right here at Indiana University through our international efforts. Thank you and enjoy the program.
Good morning and welcome to the Indiana University Kelley School of Business's Worldwide Roundtable. My name is LaVon Schlegel and I am the Executive Director of the Institute for International Business, or IIB as we more casually are known. It is my honor to follow such distinguished speakers as Provost Lauren Rebel, Vice President Hannah Buxbaum, and Dean Id Kessner on this most auspicious day, and I thank them for such a great beginning to our inaugural event in celebration of IIB's 10th anniversary. And thank you all for joining us this morning as we begin the third of our 4 global panels, all taking place today to discuss the importance of global connectedness during disruption and beyond. You are among the almost 600 registrants to these 4 events. As you can imagine, it took a global team to put this together successfully. I would like to thank Jen Goyens and Allison DeWitt from the Kelley School Alumni Association, Roy Hooper from the IU Alumni Association, Andrea Adam Moore from the IU European Gateway, Ali Batten, who is the director of all of the IU Global Gateways, Rob Clendening and Rebecca Salerno from Kelley Marketing, the Provost's Office, the Office of the Vice President for International Affairs, Zach Watt and Brian Boucher from Kelley Learning Media Team. And finally, I would like to thank Tim Smith from IIB, without whom this project would not have happened. During the past decade, IIB has been in the world working to bring people together with new thoughts, new ideas, new skills, and new relationships, always in hope of creating momentum for change. Reflecting back on these years, I'm especially grateful that I attended IU as an undergraduate student in the very early 1980s, for it was during this time I had the great privilege of knowing Chancellor Herman Wells through the work I did with the student organization. As a farm kid from Indiana, the chancellor encouraged me to go beyond what I knew, beyond my comfort zone, to experience the world for all of its possibilities and challenges. His words have encouraged me throughout my career, bringing me to today, to this event. I know that Chancellor Wells would be proud of what we have accomplished, but he would ask me in the very next breath, so what's next? What's next in our work on the global stage? What's next in creating and maintaining the global relationships that have moved business and education forward with such velocity in the last 20 years? What's next for making sure that we all have a chance to learn and grow from our relationship with partners and friends from around the world to build something better? And along with the what's next, we must also look to the how. How do we do it together? Because it is the sharing between nations, between businesses, and between people where the best ideas and the best solutions are born. So it is no small task that we've asked you all to participate in today. Our moderator and panel will tackle some of these questions head on. sharing their ideas, experiences, and hopes. In the breakout sessions, we look to all of you here today to share your ideas and actions for keeping your global network alive and active and engaged during this time. I am pleased to introduce today's moderator, Hamish Banks. Hamish is currently serving as the Vice President of Communications for Marathon Petroleum Corporation, a leading integrated downstream energy company operating the U.S.'s largest refining system with nationwide midstream and branded retail marketing locations. However, prior to Marathon, Hamish was Vice President of Public Affairs and Communications for Eurasia for the Coca-Cola Company, where he managed corporate reputation building and risk mitigation programs across 84 countries. And it is here that Hamish became what we called a friend of IIB. For 3 years, he led the MENA Scholars Program, also known as a Global Institute that you heard Id talk about, in partnership with the U.S. Department of State and the Kelley School of Business at Indiana University. Hamish has lived and worked in 10 countries and is a graduate of the University of Oxford. Hamish, welcome today, and please join me in continuing this really important conversation.
Thank you, LaVon. And let me just say at the outset here that my experience with GBI was, I think, one of the defining moments in my career. There was 3 years of really figuring out what it means to make a difference. And I want to thank you, IIB, Kelley School of Business, for involving me in that, but particularly for putting together this program today and for all of the support that Indiana University is providing here. Thanks also to everybody who's taken their time out to join this event, and particularly to our panelists today. So we have 3 panelists who represent a broad spectrum of industries and experience, but linked together with a common thread that each of them share the honor, distinction of achieving an MBA from the Kelley School of Business. And I'm personally very jealous that they have that and I don't yet. So let me introduce our 3 panelists. First, Anurag Bansal. Anurag serves as Chief Financial Officer for &Ever, an agricultural technology company based in Berlin, Germany. He works in offices across Germany, Middle East, Singapore, with more than 20 years experience operating across Europe, Asia, and North America. A seasoned finance and strategy professional, he's worked with companies such as Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, and GE. He's worked in the M&A space and graduated from Kelley with his MBA in 2005. Joining us from Singapore is Li Chen. She currently serves as Head of Human Resources for the Hilti Corporation, a European-based multinational company headquartered in Liechtenstein that develops, manufactures, and markets products for the construction, building, maintenance, energy, and manufacturing industries, mainly to the professional end user. Like all our panelists, Lee has worked in numerous locations in Europe, the US, China, and Singapore since earning her MBA at Kelley. Our third panelist is Anubhav Ranjan, with more than 15 years of global experience in product management, marketing, strategy, sales, and operations. He too has worked in Asia, Europe, and the US across diverse industries, the HVAC industry, transportation, industrial automation, and paper and pulp. He's currently leading product management for Rheem for their residential HVAC product portfolio with nearly $1 billion in revenue. Previously worked at Lennox in product management as a product management lead for smart thermostats. He's also got a background in sales with Sumitomo Electric and a storied career at GE in global marketing roles across intelligent platforms, corporate, and GE transportation. In addition to Anubhav's MBA in marketing from the Kelley School, he has an MS in process engineering and a BS in electronics engineering. So we've got a remarkably accomplished panel. So welcome to you all. Today we're going to talk about this topic of the importance of global connectedness at a time of disruption and beyond. And while the global pandemic of COVID-19 is probably foremost on our minds right now, I'd like to think that perhaps we'll be able to kind of bring our lens back out a little bit and think about other issues where we've been in disruptive times and how we're equipped personally and through our businesses to be able to cope with those. There are a couple of thoughts that occurred to me as we go into this. I mean, the first is this kind of paradox of this global connectedness. I mean, as internationally oriented business people, you know, we think long-term, we think across borders, but we're dealing with a pandemic which is constantly changing. It's requiring us to act locally and respond. So the question immediately is, how do we bring our resources and our experience to bear to marry up those short-term needs together with the long-term implications of a truly globally connected business environment? Related to that as well, we're starting to see, and we've seen in the last few years, traditional alliances are being challenged, either because of political pressure, sometimes business related to tariffs or other issues, which in some cases is forcing businesses or encouraging them to think in terms of more localized, self-sufficient solutions rather than global partnerships. So how do we, as representatives of global corporations or multinational corporations, respond to that? And what's our best advice to others? And then the last point, I guess, is this idea of the unprecedented times in which we live. And I don't know about anybody else, but I'm kind of tired of hearing that phrase. We talk about it a lot, but what I'd like to hear from this group, and what I think this entire day of seminars is designed to do, is to think about what are the actions that come out of this, and what are the practical steps that we can take. So I'd like to start the conversation with our panelists with kind of an open-ended question, really focusing on where we are today with the pandemic and what does this mean about the way in which we're managing business and what has been the impact. So let me start with Anubhav. From your perspective, how are you managing during the crisis?
Yeah, so thanks, Hamish. So in the short term, the changes were mostly operational and focused, because when the pandemic hit, we didn't have a playbook. Right? We didn't have a playbook. We didn't know how to go about it. So our first priority was really to ensure employee safety while keeping the business moving. And since we have a large global and local footprint with multiple manufacturing sites and offices, and all needed to be acted upon simultaneously, right? So I think with the initial managing of the short-term employee safety while keeping the business running, the two big changes I have seen is around communication and supply chain, the way we manage. So from a communication standpoint, even though we've been a global company and we had digital tools, but most of the calls were on the phone. I think before pandemic, we never used video calls, but once this came in, we started to deliberately use video calls. And I've seen that the interaction among the team, the cohesiveness has become much better. So on the positive side, this pandemic forced us to really use some of these tools, which we already had, which actually brought a diverse and distributed team, made them more connected. And the second thing is around supply chain. So in terms of the partnership, we are, our component strategy was focused mostly in one geographical area. I think the big takeaway from this pandemic is we want diversification. We want to have diversification of our sourcing base, of our partners, so we can hedge against, any future disruption, geopolitical or any business scenarios. So those were some thoughts from my end, Hamish.
Yeah, I think that that notion of diversification is really interesting. I mean, we often talk about crisis creating opportunity. There, we'll maybe come back and look at this and talk about some of those opportunities in more detail in a moment. I'd like to go to Singapore now and ask Li Chen for her perspective from the human resources angle. What's changed? What's different for you at the Hilti Corporation?
Yeah, absolutely. So from, as I'm working mainly, on the people topic, so we do see some significant changes. One of the most important we're actually working right now is really just to tailoring the whole employee experience, as we feel this is something we actually can differentiate ourselves, even, we're still like working very virtually in the current setup. And especially I think, the key difference between every single employee during this whole pandemic just becoming like so obvious, as everyone have a different pressure, back in their private life. So we're just trying to tailor the approach to individuals or the segments of people. So there's like basically like no one size fit all. It means, we have to literally, revisit our whole hiring strategies, our hiring approach, our onboarding approach, and also in terms of even on the rewards, we have to think like very differently. Then on the other side, which I also see is actually, the CSR part, actually becoming a very, very important element as a key contributor to engage our team members, which is actually not I would say a key factor if I look back, in the past decade. But now people actually have a much higher awareness, especially with the younger generation, on how the company is able to contribute in this COVID pandemic, and also not only in the short term, but also in the midterm and long term. And that eventually helping us to differentiate our, whole employee brandings with our competitors as well.
Yeah, so again, another example where Anubhav talked about diversification, you're talking about differentiation, and particularly the importance of engagement with community. And I think there's sometimes a tendency to get very inwardly focused when we're faced with crisis, and we tend to go into a kind of bunker mentality. And perhaps it's something that we might explore as well, as this responsibility that the corporation has, that the organization has, that goes beyond just its own employees, but of the community as a whole. Let's go to Anurag, maybe from a more financially related perspective. As a chief financial officer, have you seen changes in the way in which your function has changed during the pandemic, or is there something that's really leapt out at you over the course of the last 6 months?
Yep. So I think thanks for the question, Hamish, and very glad to be on the panel. So unlike Li Chen's experience or Anubhav's experience, in most situations we have been in a fortunate situation, right? So Anubhav said that there was no playbook to deal with it. We were a very early stage startup company when this whole thing started, so we didn't even have a game. Forget about the playbook. We were just in the process of developing the product and going to the market and scaling up. So a lot of outcomes from pandemic has been very, very positive for our business, actually, right? So this corporate responsibility, the impact of climate change, and how sustainability and all these topics have become very, very prevalent and important now. And it has actually really helped our business. We have grown way more than we thought we would as a company. And we have become from a German or European company, suddenly we are a multinational company, which we have offices in Middle East, Singapore, and all these places now. So we have been very fortunate. So from finance perspective, the only challenge, I would say the real challenge we have experienced is we don't have enough capital to serve the demand. And in this environment, it's becoming harder to raise capital, harder to meet investors and actually go and pitch your ideas and things like that. And that has been the real challenge. Operationally, we are a very small team here in the central location. And I would say the other challenge would be that to find a proper connectivity between the different geographies that we are kind of expanding into, because all this is happening during the time of pandemic. It's harder to travel and recruit people and stuff like that in those locations specifically. So that has been the real challenge.
Yeah, you mentioned geographies, and this is a Berlin Gateway panel, but I think perhaps uniquely we have people in this discussion here from Singapore to Plano, Texas, to the East Coast to somebody who is in Berlin. So just kind of zeroing in from a European perspective for a second. I mean, we all work for organizations which have a footprint across multiple geographies. Do you see any difference in the in your experience from the European side of your business? And Anurag, maybe just stay with you on that one.
So I think from that perspective, I think you're exactly right. Maybe I'm biased and maybe it's just based on the news I read in the global media and stuff like that. But I feel we are in a very fortunate position to be in Germany, to be honest, because at least the feeling is that the pandemic and the whole situation, there are only a few companies who have dealt with it in a more organized, in a much kind of, organized way and keeping everybody along. And they've created this environment. And I feel Germany is one of those countries where we have been very, very fortunate that things have been, to me, according to whatever I know, relatively well managed. What that means is the disruption to public life has been avoided to the extent possible. The educational institutes are open to the extent possible. The businesses have always operated in a very kind of contained but secure environment. So I think that has been very, very helpful overall for the business and the daily operations.
Yeah. You talked about some of the challenges around recruiting talent during these periods. So maybe I could go to Lee as an HR professional. Kind of two questions here. I mean, one is, has this created opportunity to think differently about recruiting talent? And coming back again to the European perspective as well. I mean, you work for a European-based company. Is there any difference there in the way in which hiring, retention, acquisition strategies are differing between your European base and some of the other locations that you're operating in?
Sure, absolutely. So maybe I can give a little bit background more on the business outlook and how the whole pandemic is hitting, across global, our different entities across the world. So as you mentioned, we're serving in a construction industry. And fortunately, I mean, in our majority of the market in Europe, like Germany, mainly, it's not that heavily hit. So we just released like all the financial reports. So actually on our European market are doing pretty okay. So what we describe is, okay, everyone kind of hit with a black eye, but we're still able to coming back. So this is what we're talking about the Europe, right? It's kind of like a hard party, but we're still able to wake up in the morning. So with that, I think it's pretty lucky. But however, the situation is really diverse around the world. So for example, with the region I'm currently in the south part of Asia, which is very, very different. With Singapore as a typical example, as you may have heard about the news, it's mainly had the outbreak in the construction labors. So it means the market was totally closed, for 3 months, simply you have no sales at all. So we have to think like a very, very different compared to the majority of the organization. Then not to mention about the other small market in Southeast Asia, in India, and also with the food lockdown, in Australia and New Zealand, they're actually putting us in a very, special condition. But however, we do see this whole pandemic give a little bit like different dynamic. So for example, as in a typical global organization headquartered, in Europe, previously we always have this kind of, it's like a European kind of like a driven kind of culture. So it's a lot of things like sharing the best practice from European countries. But now with, the North Asia is actually coming back more rapidly on the whole economy recovery. We're actually doing some revert, exchange on how the things can do slightly different. So we're trying to, facilitate a lot of those exchange, for example, with China versus Germany, right? Versus, between Taiwan or some of the other small markets in Europe, which I think from the people perspective, actually it gave a little bit, a different, angles for our business leader to think about the topic differently. And also, you actually drive a very high level of buy-in. Say, okay, by the end of the day, things can do slightly different. And then maybe there is a way we can look at the emerging market rather than, like looking always at the mature market. Then back into your question, rather on the talent attraction. As I mentioned, the whole business is growing, recovering on a different speed. We actually are able to be, the whole challenge is we simply, it's not about like stopping recruiting, but it's more about how sharp, we need to bring the profile within to our organization. Okay. So it means, we're still able to be lucky enough, to recruit. And by the way, a little bit like self-advertisement, you can check about Hilti's, a career portal. There are a couple of positions available in Europe, in US, and also in Asia. Sorry, it's part of my job. But on the other side, in terms of the profile, we really wanted to make the best people with the best culture fit, as we're simply not able to afford, right, to having a mass, recruiting at this point in moment. So that means, we are actually investing even more time to get to know our candidate. So in terms of, having a lot of like a virtual touch base, or even like more proactively sharing our business outlook with a candidate in this special time, or having some like revert, like a mentoring just before, people can make a solid decision, say, okay, do they want to come into, a construction industry at this time or not? So this actually becoming, for me, is actually an excellent opportunity being an HR professional, as we can be, really be sharpened on, our approach, and also spend simply more time, right, with our talent pipeline along the way. So hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, it does prompt one follow-up, which is really about the what you're feeling about the candidate pool. So what do you feel in this, in this time of disruption, that people are, you're good candidates are seeing opportunity, they're ready to move, they're ready to take on new opportunities? Or do you feel like people are saying, I better sit tight and stay where I am right now and just wait till this all blows over?
Yeah, so I can give you a little example, and I can also share a little bit my background, as actually I graduated from the year of 10 years ago, so the year right after financial crisis. So I gave a lot of, respect for the, the graduates, for this year. So one real example, right? Actually, I'm trying to, close some of the positions, and I'm actually, not only talking about, some of the Asian talent markets, and we actually see difference. Right, for the candidates who actually graduate this year, it's a very, very tough job market, and how agile and how proactive the candidates are actually position themselves. Or, so for example, I have like one candidate is really, really proactive, after a couple of me, he's basically, enrolling a lot of like a free webinar we're even doing for the customer. And he trying to join those webinar and trying to share, his perspective, say, hey, being a fresh grad, what that really means if I need to be a product manager, within Hilti's corporation. And like all those like proactive like sharings and like interaction from those candidates actually give us a very, very, deep impression. And that eventually converted to a much easier, I would say, a recruiting process to seek like all the leadership spotting. And eventually, once he's on board, I think it's all his, a commitment and investment on the time actually turned out to be a really fast, result on his performance as well. So this is just give a little bit examples. I think it's a tough market. We have to face this, but the opportunity are still there. It's not saying, okay, the whole market is closed. I don't see that, from my perspective.
Great, thank you. And you're making a great pitch for good candidates. So keep pushing it out there, and we'll make sure your email address is there for everybody to apply for great jobs at Hilti. And Anubhav, let's go back onto talking geographies as well. From your perspective, do you see differences in the different markets now, particularly between Europe and some of the other markets in which you operate during this pandemic crisis? Are there things that are unique about any particular market or influences that you're seeing emerge that you haven't seen before?
Yes, a couple of things. From I'll start with the sourcing perspective, right? So for the longest time, obviously, we've focused on Asia from a sourcing standpoint. I think this pandemic has opened up opportunities for us to use Europe, specifically Eastern Europe, as a sourcing base. Earlier we've had some reach outs from some suppliers, but we were so entrenched, and we were like in the business moving so fast, we did not spend much time to do those evaluations. But now that is a big focus for us. So that's a positive thing that's going to come out. The other thing, just to take on the recruitment perspective, I mean, we are thinking out of the box here. So take a step back here. So earlier, productivity was directly correlated to being in office mostly, right? So, okay, you got to be in the office to be productive. I mean, that was the prevalent thought process. But with pandemic, everybody working, from home, the productivity hasn't gone down. So that hypothesis has been challenged. And to that end, then, why do we have to recruit somebody in Dallas for working in Dallas if they're working from home? Why can't they be based in Europe, right? So again, given that, I mean, we are looking at Europe as a good source for talent, in the future. Again, this is all in the drawing board, but just thinking out of the box. And with the Europe time difference, 5-6 hours, it's practically more easy to merge somebody who's in Europe than somebody who's in Asia. So those are the two things I think which we are thinking from a Europe perspective, sourcing and recruiting in the future.
Yeah, it so often comes down to people, and we can have the best hardware, the best programs, the best technology, but at some point, leveraging and accessing the best software people is important. And where this conversation is kind of leading, I think, is to thinking a little bit about, people talk about the new normal. I mean, you talked about, new opportunities that are opening up for sourcing talent. You alluded to, that ability to be able to locate people in different geographies, and that's a very different way of thinking about work. So, we talk a lot about the new normal, and I kind of it sends a shiver up my spine, because I think every time we talk about the new normal, we're kind of dragging ourselves back into the past. And from my perspective, I mean, I feel like we need to be thinking about what the new reality is and not be anchored too much in the past. And I think all of you have talked about some of the opportunities that have been created by this pandemic, particularly. So maybe we could talk a little bit about what the future of work looks like on a global basis. And there are two strands I'd like to follow here. One is built around this idea of disruption. So we have forcibly had to change the way that we think about our business because of the pandemic disruption. And disruption is a favored word for startups and entrepreneurs. It's break things, move fast. But as we know, from working in large organizations. Most employees want certainty. They want to feel a degree of comfort, and this can be very scary. So in a world which is being disrupted for employees, how do we take advantage of that disruption and turn it into a positive? And kind of allied with that, maybe you could talk a little bit about some of the best practices or the tools or the new new initiatives that you might have put in place or thinking about put in place that are going to kind of shape what the future of work looks like. And if I can overlay one more thing on that, it would be, how different is that going to be local versus global? So disruption, best practices and tools, and how far are those some of those best practices able to be leveraged on a global basis, or do some of them need to stay local? So, Anurag, can I go back to you on that one?
Yeah. I'll start. As I said, we are in a fortunate space where our company was fairly small. So for us, it has always been a very, very positive situation. And for us, the good thing is the disruption is minimal, but we just need to still think through how do we do things a bit differently. I would say, one of the things I've learned is that change has been very personal. So I'll go back to what Anubhav was also speaking about, that, this belief that, you had to be in office and things like that. Actually, it was also true for me. I worked for the last few years in companies where most of the people are coming up from very younger generation, and they were already telling me and giving me enough signs that, guys, this being in office, FaceTime, and these kind of things are just so old school. But I personally myself was also resistant to it, right? So it was, of course, it was like, okay, you have work flexibility, it was all allowed, but I still innately, if I really dig deep in, inside myself, I also had the belief that, being in office, being together as a team is more productive. And I can tell you that has been the biggest change, that my personal biases have totally gone away, right, from that perspective. Interestingly enough, from the other side, the younger people who I thought are more asking for this, they want to be more connected, by the way, because we are a young and growing company. We have a lot of new coming people, right? So especially the new people, they want to feel more connected. So they actually, even though people want the facility to work remotely and do all the things globally, most people still expect a desk to show up to. It's just that they want to show up when they feel like it, not on a regular basis. So I think it has been a change in biases, both from people like us and also from the other side, the younger people. I feel like they want more connectivity. And I think that is the real disruption, where we could, coming from the different mindset, help them feel more connected, and they could educate us more in, okay, how can you be more open and work remotely? And I would say that has been the real big change. Now, we don't, for most of the roles and jobs we don't advertise location, we don't advertise where the person has to come from. It's a simple role, right? And we just find the right candidate in the best possible way. That's how we have been trying to recruit people. There have been some other changes, which is related to, I guess, geopolitical stuff, even before pandemic that started. If I look at the people who used to go towards, places like America, England, and Australia, mostly the English-speaking countries, which were the more migrating countries, because of geopolitical and other reasons, Brexit and current environment in US and whatever, those doors have really become harder to open. So being in Europe is a very fortunate place. I get tons of applications from people from China and India, and these guys who would have never even applied. So we get a lot of great candidates and inflow without even trying. I mean, sometimes it's just people don't even read job description, they just apply. So that's a bad sign. But I can tell you that has been amazingly positive also, that you can actually pick the right people. You have a lot bigger talent pool, and salaries and those things you don't even know. So it's very hard to budget. Sometimes you would expect to pay this, but actually you can find a great talent which will only cost literally a fraction. Yeah, because it's a very global and open market.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like a lot of this is in flux still. I mean, I think we can all start to imagine a future which is more liquid in the sense of, you know, folks being in different places. But that paradox of wanting to be connected and yet being very comfortable being apart is one that I think industry businesses still need to figure out. I mean, do you feel like you have, I mean, you talked about, you know, a lot of, you're getting a lot of interest from folks from all over the world. I mean, there's a kind of new appetite to change, to move around. Do you feel like you've got any kind of significant shifts in programs, or, you know, your ability to be able to accommodate that, I guess, is really the question. I mean, are you there yet, or are you working towards it?
I think it's a work in progress, but as I said, because being a young company, we could adapt ourselves very quickly. We didn't have to change and disrupt ourselves. This is our normal. This is where we are actually starting to set up our processes, our hiring, recruiting, everything. So you know, unlike you know, maybe in Lechen's company or Anubhav's company, they had to kind of adapt and change and things like that. In our case, there was no change. It was, okay, this is what we are thrown at. And we were anyway in the process of setting the whole company and the business. And we just are trying to set up in the best possible way. So as I said, in many ways, the pandemic has been only positive for me and my company. I only see a lot of positives, and challenges have been actually fairly minimal.
Great. So let's go to Lee from the HR professional's perspective on this. You know, disruption, connectedness. What are the best practices that you're putting in place, or that you envisage for the future? What are going to be the standards that the best talent is going to expect coming out of this?
Yeah, sure. So that one I can also share a little bit like on my personal experience. So before I, relocated to Singapore, I actually, work at the global role for a couple of years. So it means, regardless, where I locate, I always, work in the global setup. Actually, at the time, I think it's a little bit like a pilot in Hilti's this very traditional world, but actually it works pretty well, especially, if you're working on the project base. You actually have more flexibility, to work on the project than being, a mom with 2 kids. That also gave me a lot of, freedom to balance on the personal side. Then now, with the whole COVID-19 situation, I think it just simply accelerates the adoption for, this, a virtual working environment if your role is able to accommodate. But however, now as I'm more working, in a kind of like a local setup, which our business model simply do not support, as we, we're heavily rely on the direct sales. So it makes our sales need to go to the construction side, to sell our products. Then it's all about, how to making sure we have the right, setup, we have the right, safety measures, for our, team member. Then also, we need to do a lot of resilience trainings, coaching, especially for our team leaders. As by end of the day, if you don't give the right support, if you don't give especially the right emotional support, let me put in this way, then it's simply a lot for people to take in this current environment. So we actually do invest a lot of extra time to work with our very young team leaders, to helping them understand how to deal with the different situations, and also give them a lot of playbook, a lot of right to use tools, so they can actually use like right away. So I would say it really depends on your job profile, and there's like no one formula fit all, as I mentioned.
Yeah, a couple of times we've used the phrase playbook here. I think the challenge is in dealing with the unexpected is that we probably couldn't have imagined that we'd be where we are as we are right now. And I think I can certainly say from my experience, we had to move very quickly to develop playbooks, protocols, to think differently. And maybe there's something in that of the crisis again, kind of creating forcing us into a fresh way of thinking and approaching issues. The industry that I currently work in, the refining industry, is kind of traditional in the sense that it's kind of static. We have large large plants that don't move, and people have to go there to turn valves and make things happen and whatnot. And I would imagine and I'm going to turn to Anubhav here on from a manufacturing perspective. I mean, what does the future of work look like from a manufacturer's point of view?
Yeah, so I agree with everything which Anurag and Lee said, right? I mean, if you take a step backward, right, when this all hit, most companies were very quick in enabling their employees to work remotely, right? So that worked out pretty fine. But if you think about the digital enablement of the process within the company, I think we were far behind, and many industrial manufacturers, they are a little bit behind, right? I mean, it's a traditional industry, like you said, Hamish. I mean, we are like 100-year-old company, so there are ways to do things, which are not digital. So I think one of the big priority for us is to digitally enable the businesses, right? I mean, so you have visibility across silos. You don't have to get into a meeting to figure out, okay, what are the next steps? You could digitally share documents, plans, you name it. So I think that is the biggest thing for industrial manufacturers is digitally enabling the processes and busting the silos digitally, if you will. It'll take time because the process requires unlearning and then training and then relearning, and it's an iterative process, but that's the path we're going to take.
Great. I can see where we've had a great discussion, and I know there's going to be a lot of questions from our folks who are listening in. So I just want to combine two questions at the end here and try and cover these off in the last 5 minutes. And the first is your free shot to talk back to your alma mater, to the Kelley School of Business, to IIB. What's the advice that you give from your experience, both as accomplished professionals, as internationally focused folks, people who have embraced the global connectedness that is the heart of this conversation, and particularly, I think we can all kind of claim some battle-hardened experience that we've had over the last six months or so. So that's the first part of the question is kind of what do you want to tell Kelley to put on their curriculum for the next wave of MBA students? And then the second part is really the wrap up question, which is kind of what, if we think about everything that's that we've talked about this morning, this afternoon, this evening, a lot of good things. I'm hearing opportunity. I'm hearing diversification. I'm hearing the chance to establish difference. What are the positives that you take out of this last 6 months that will take us out on a high note? So, two questions. You get a free shot at LaVon and Dean Kessner, and tell them what to put on their curriculum, and then just give me a little wrap up of where you've seen positive opportunity and learning coming out. So, and let's say with Anubhav, what do you got for us?
So I would say from a curriculum standpoint, I think we need to add a lot of material in terms of figuring out how to manage a digital and distributed workforce. I think that is huge. It's about how do you manage people? How do you work with your peer? How do you communicate? How do you influence people? So I think that would be a critical thing. And then the second thing is, business schools always do a good job of scenario planning, but I don't think many of the companies would have planned this scenario, right? And be ready for it. So I think those are the two things I would say the business school needs to focus on more, or add more content on.
Okay, good advice. Anurag, what do you think?
Yeah, I think I'll speak of things which I think are kind of common to the two things that you were trying to kind of ask us to talk about, the business school and what has been the positive and things like that. So what I would say is the situation has reminded us all that the basics are no different. The basics of things have always been talked about, right? So for example, that you have to be nimble, that you have to be digitally enabled and stuff like that. I mean, these things are the tenets have been around for decades. It's a matter of somebody took it seriously and the others didn't. So this pandemic has really accelerated the refocus, even in the personal life, right? Things that matter, just do those, and things that don't matter, spend less time and effort on those. Same for business. Things that matter and really important, be thoughtful about what you do. Don't become a bloated organization with a lot of rigidity. So I think those things have not changed. So that has been the real learning from the pandemic, to say, okay, the basics don't matter. Basics don't change. From the business school perspective, I don't really have a great suggestion on the content itself, but what I would think is from Kelley's perspective, I think it's a great opportunity. Again, I like to think of opportunities. Kelley was one of the first, I think, a business program where the Kelley Direct and online and these kind of things have already been ahead, right? And I think it's sort of in the global connected world, I think it levels the playing field a little bit more. So what does that mean? That the brand of the school and things like that are hopefully lesser importance, versus who has the best connectivity, right? So it's like almost if you take the Amazon approach, if you focus on the customer and Kelley is the best channel to acquire students, then hopefully you can source content and what courses in a more innovative way, and hopefully use that as your growth engine. So I think we're in a fortunate space to have some advantages, and this hopefully accelerates that advantage and brings it more to the forefront, is what I would think.
Great points. Thank you. Lee, over to you. A couple of thoughts?
Yeah, sure. So maybe from some different angle. So for me, one of the big things I see as a key differentiator is really about the the mental resilience, in this time. By the end of the day, I think the key competencies, everyone who are able to be enrolled in Kelley and able to graduate, I don't see significant difference. But how I see, people are starting to show the difference, in the work is really how they are able to cope with the uncertainty time and how they are able to face with a different attitude. So that I actually, do think, if we can spend a little bit of time to helping our current, cohort to reflect from the current experience and to, to have, each other, helping each other, during this kind of time will be actually a very good way, to invest the time. Yeah, another thing is more thinking about very loud is I also see the huge benefit, to have more connections with the corporations and to give like a more life experience for our current cohort. That's because the whole transformation speed, in the industry now is just unbelievable fast. Then everything has been accelerated, with the whole pandemic. And for me, I see a lot of opportunities actually for the whole MBA student, to play a role, right, in all those transformations. And we need people able to think strategically. And there is also, it's a time, we're also tight, in terms of a lot of resources. So I do see it's a kind of like a win-win how we can pair up, with the Kelley grad, with the industry to do some like a mini like modules. So people can really learn from the real world and, and also build up their credibility. We're eventually giving them, some shortcuts for the job searching.
Great, thank you. A couple of things. If I can put my 2 cents in as well. From a communication professional standpoint, I think one of the things that I've learned out of all of this is that when the pressure's on and you feel like you want to kind of crawl into a hole and pull the blankets over your head and hope that things go away, you got to fight that off. I mean, you've got to go back to your core instincts of connecting, communicating, and the reasons for that, I think, are kind of obvious. I mean, the ability that creates for us to learn, and we've had some examples of best practices that you've talked about and how you're thinking about the future. The only way that we get through these disruptive times is by being imaginative, being creative. And if we're only looking from our own narrow perspective, then it's unlikely we're going to come up with great solutions. And I know from firsthand experience of having managed or been part of a crisis emergency response team at Marathon for the COVID-19 pandemic, that we would not have been half as effective as we were without the input of all of the different business units, accommodating the folks who think differently from the way that we do, and particularly kind of looking out beyond the obvious places. I mean, Marathon is a US-based organization, but we have marine operations in Singapore, and we've got midstream operations and storage in Mexico and retail there. And some of the insight that was generated there was really valuable. The other point that I'd make is just kind of reinforcing the value, this is thinking longer term, of Golden Triangle partnerships. And I mentioned the GBI experience that I benefited from at the beginning. I mean, that ability to bring together private sector, which all of our panelists represent here, civil society and government working together. In whether that's in a CSR program that Lee was talking about earlier, the ability that we have to be able to create differentiation, distinction, to kind of find new and fresh solutions. We've got to be working with those partners and do that on a global basis. So, I never miss an opportunity to push forward the Golden Triangle ideas. We've kind of come to the end of our time here for the panel, and I'm hoping that we've got a few questions which are waiting in the wings. And I don't see anything coming up just yet, but I want to thank everybody who's been, all three of my panelists, and again to thank LaVon, the IAB, and others for putting together this discussion. My takeout from this is, a lot of positivity. I think we've been tested. I think we have, responded with imagination, fortitude, and shared some great examples of how we can push forward here to develop the kind of solutions, the action that I talked about that goes beyond just the words. So we do have a couple of questions that come in here. And the first one is, you'll bear with me if I'm peering at my screen here. What advice do the panelists have regarding best practice in connectivity? Any thoughts on connectivity? So I don't know whether that's coming from a point of using technology to be connected, or whether it is more of a general question about being connected. But let's any thoughts that you have from that perspective, a connectivity point?
I mean, really, Hamish, from a technology standpoint, we've been just using either Microsoft Teams or Zoom, right? If that is what the question is.
Yeah. Well, I think we've all become a little more adept at using the technology, and barking dogs and other challenges notwithstanding.
I think one difference that has happened is probably, if I take the view of a year earlier, people who were working remotely, it was always a question, that if I'm out of office, out of sight, am I being valued enough, and things like that always pop up, right? And but what I've seen recently is there is increased effort from both sides, both from the managers as well as the people working in the teams, to make sure they are talking to each other and making sure that they are more keeping up to date. It's not just all about, okay, let's assign a task, wait for the result until the person comes back. The people are interacting on a more regular basis. And I think that fear of missing out on the promotion or being valued in the right way by working remotely and things like that, I think that has really improved a lot in the last, I would say, few months. Is this increased effort? Even it's just almost the top of mind, even for me, for example, right? Earlier it was more task oriented and objectives oriented. Now that these kind of even simple people issues are always top of the mind, to make sure that even if it's 8 p.m, I do call my, some of the team members to make sure I speak to them. More calls initiated by me rather than from their side. So I think those are the kind of things I would say are very helpful.
Yeah, again, we're coming back again to that human touch part of the discussion. I mean, our businesses operate because of the ingenuity of our people. So staying close, staying connected, in whatever form we do that is of course critical. Lee, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think, actually I also see it's a little bit, how to say, progress on the topic. I think, at the beginning of the pandemic, everyone is trying to be super professional, if we are connecting like virtually, then sooner or later, we all figure out, we're not robots, we're all human beings. And then it's very important, sorry, being like a little bit like a child, we're trying to set the stage. Oh, come on, let's be a little bit, be a person, let's be ourselves. It's okay if we're talking about, some of the limitations we have back home. We may have dogs, we may have babies, we may have the other roles we have to play. That's totally fine. Then it's more about, to be proactively communicate, and also just to appreciate if people are able to tell, what are the concerns. Then on the other side, I think, we also appreciate some of like the little, how to say, surprise or connections, with, beyond the whole technology. So for example, we still do a little bit like away. If people are having birthday, we're still trying to send each other like the real birthday cake so we can celebrate. So for example, like on Friday afternoon, we still wanted to have this beer moment, so we can grab something sitting on our balcony, and we have, kind of trying to build this whole team momentum. And I think like all those little things actually eventually help us to translate to the trust and also translate to the whole productivity. Simply, there's no shortcut, even behind the whole laptop. We just need to be ourselves. We need to talk about our personal stuff, and we need to be connected.
Yeah, I mean, we think we kind of naturally gravitate towards thinking about connectivity in terms of putting people together. I mean, our employees. Just kind of one sort of thought to add on that, or question to add on that is, I mean, when it comes to connectivity with suppliers, and Anubhav, maybe this is a question for you. Connections with suppliers in the B2B space. I mean, have you seen any difference in the level of connectivity, or what we should be doing better from that? Quick answer, because we need to move on. And
yeah, quick answer, not really, because our suppliers have been global, and typical engagement had been with phone, maybe 1 or 2 face-to-face visits. So from that standpoint, I have not seen any break in communication with the suppliers.
Great. Okay, good. All right. Well, we're out of time. Again, I want to thank all my panelists for a great discussion, great insights. I feel that the value of the Kelley education has been proven yet again in this discussion. So thank you all for your contributions. Much appreciated. Thank you to Tim and the IIB team for putting this together, and congratulations to LaVon and everybody for 10 years of an extraordinary initiative. So thank you all.
Thank you, Hamish.
Thanks.